The House Judiciary Committee hearing room fell silent as Chairman Jerrold Nadler's words hung in the air. The veteran New York congressman had just delivered what many would later describe as one of the most inappropriate comments ever uttered in a congressional hearing. "Perhaps, Mr. Patel," Nadler had said, his voice carrying unmistakable disdain. "You should go back to Uganda before lecturing this committee on American national security." The racially charged insult directed at former Defense Department Chief of Staff Kash Patel created an immediate tension that electrified the packed chamber. Committee members on both sides of the aisle appeared stunned, with several Republican representatives beginning to voice objections. But before the gavel could fall, Patel, the son of Indian immigrants who had risen to the highest echelons of America's national security apparatus, adjusted his microphone with remarkable composure. His expression betrayed no anger, only a focused determination that commanded attention. "Mr. Chairman," Patel began, his voice steady and measured, "before I respond to that comment, I'd like to share something with the committee that I hadn't planned to discuss today." What followed wasn't just a response to an insult. It was a moment of such profound patriotism and personal dignity that it would transcend the political divide and leave an indelible mark on the American conscience. Before we examine this remarkable exchange that has the entire nation talking, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more coverage of the pivotal moments shaping America's political landscape. Kash Patel's journey to that congressional hearing room embodied the American dream in its purest form. Born to Indian immigrants who had come to the United States in search of better opportunities, Patel had built an extraordinary career through determination and service to his adopted homeland. After earning his law degree, Patel had served as a public defender before joining the Department of Justice as a national security prosecutor, handling complex terrorism cases. His expertise eventually led him to Capitol Hill, where he worked as senior counsel for the House Intelligence Committee. Later, he would serve in critical national security roles, including as deputy assistant to the president and senior director for counterterrorism at the National Security Council before becoming chief of staff to the acting Secretary of Defense. Throughout his career, Patel had maintained a reputation for substantive expertise rather than partisan combat. Even those who disagreed with his policy positions acknowledged his deep knowledge of national security matters and his commitment to protecting American interests. Congressman Jerrold Nadler brought his own substantial background to the confrontation. The longtime representative from New York had served in Congress since 1992 and had become chairman of the powerful House Judiciary Committee. Known for his sharp legal mind and occasionally combative style, Nadler had been a central figure in some of the most contentious congressional investigations of recent years. The hearing that brought them together focused on national security, implications of classified document handling, a topic that had become increasingly politicized. Patel had been called to testify about protocols for handling sensitive information, given his experience at the highest levels of the intelligence and defense communities. The session had been tense from the beginning, with partisan divisions evident in both the questioning and responses. Democratic members pressed Patel on decisions made during the previous administration, while Republicans focused on establishing his credentials and expertise. As the hearing progressed, Nadler had grown increasingly frustrated with what he perceived as Patel's evasive answers to direct questions about specific documents. The chairman's questions had become more pointed and his tone more dismissive. The breaking point came when Patel began explaining the proper context for understanding classification decisions, citing his experience across multiple agencies. It was then that Nadler had interrupted with his shocking comment. "Perhaps, Mr. Patel, you should go back to Uganda before lecturing this committee on American national security." The remark, with its unmistakable suggestion that Patel, as a person of color, was somehow foreign or less American despite his distinguished service, created an immediate shockwave through the hearing room. Several committee members appeared visibly uncomfortable, while others began raising points of order. It was at this pivotal moment, with the hearing on the verge of descending into chaos, that Patel had requested the opportunity to respond, setting the stage for what would become one of the most memorable moments in recent congressional history. As Kash Patel began to speak, the committee room remained unusually quiet. Even members who had been preparing to raise procedural objections to Nadler's comment paused, curious to hear how Patel would respond to such a personal attack. "First, Mr. Chairman," Patel said, his voice clear and measured, "I believe there may be some confusion about my background. My parents immigrated to the United States from East Africa, specifically Kenya, not Uganda. Though they are of Indian descent, they came to this country with very little, seeking the American dream that has defined our nation's promise throughout its history." He paused briefly, making eye contact with Nadler, who had the grace to look somewhat discomforted. "But the geographic correction is far less important than the underlying implication of your comment," Patel continued. "The suggestion that I should go back anywhere else reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of what American identity truly means." Rather than showing anger, Patel reached into his breast pocket and removed a small worn photograph, placing it on the table before him. "This is a picture of my father taking his oath of citizenship in 1980, he explained, his voice taking on a hint of emotion for the first time. "He and my mother worked multiple jobs while raising my sister and me, teaching us that America was a place where merit and hard work mattered more than background or birthplace." Patel looked up, scanning the faces of committee members from both parties. "I still believe that's true, which is why I've dedicated my professional life to protecting this nation's security, the very topic we're discussing today. The strategic pivot back to substance rather than continuing the personal confrontation was masterful, demonstrating Patel's focus on the issues rather than the insult. Now, regarding the actual matter before this committee," he continued, "my perspective on document classification comes not from any foreign influence, but from serving as a federal prosecutor handling terrorism cases, as senior counsel to congressional committees, and as an official responsible for some of our nation's most sensitive intelligence and defense information." Patel pulled out a document from his portfolio. "In fact, I've brought with me the training guidelines I helped develop for handling classified information across agencies. Guidelines that received bipartisan support when implemented. This substantive response, providing actual expertise rather than engaging with the racial provocation, shifted the dynamic in the room. Several Democratic committee members appeared visibly relieved that Patel had chosen a path that might allow the hearing to return to its intended purpose. But Patel wasn't quite finished addressing the underlying issue. "Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add one more thing about your comment," he said, his tone remaining respectful but firm. "Throughout my career in public service, I've worked alongside Americans of every background imaginable. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, and more. In the national security community, what matters isn't where you or your parents came from, but your commitment to the Constitution and the American people." He leaned forward slightly. "When I served at the Defense Department and National Security Council, I worked with colleagues who could trace their American ancestry back generations and others who were first-generation immigrants like me. What united us was a shared commitment to keeping this country safe, not our varying backgrounds." Nadler, appearing increasingly uncomfortable, attempted to interrupt. "Mr. Patel, I think we should return to the subject of with respect, Mr. Chairman," Patel said firmly. "You opened this line of discussion, and I believe I'm entitled to respond." The chairman, recognizing the validity of this point, nodded reluctantly. "The notion that someone who wasn't born here, or whose parents weren't born here, is somehow less American or less qualified to speak on matters of national security isn't just personally offensive," Patel continued. "It's contrary to the fundamental principles that make America exceptional among nations." He gestured to the committee members. "Look around this room. We have representatives whose families have been in America for generations, and others who are themselves immigrants or children of immigrants. That diversity of background alongside unity of purpose isn't a weakness. It's America's greatest strength. Patel then did something unexpected. Rather than demanding an apology or calling for Nadler to be censured, moves that many in the room might have anticipated, he extended an olive branch. Mr. Chairman, I don't believe your comment reflects your true values or those of most members of this committee. We all sometimes speak hastily in moments of frustration, so rather than dwelling on it further, I'd suggest we refocus on the critical national security issues that brought us here today. This remarkable display of grace, refusing to exploit what could have been a politically damaging moment for Nadler, caught many observers by surprise. Several committee members, including some Democrats, nodded appreciatively at Patel's measured response. Nadler, clearly recognizing the dignity of Patel's approach, cleared his throat. "Mr. Patel, he began, then paused, seemingly unsure how to proceed. You're right that my comment was inappropriate. I apologize." This unexpected apology from a chairman not known for backing down created a palpable shift in the hearing room atmosphere. Patel acknowledged it with a simple nod. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman." Now, returning to the matter of classification protocols that the committee was asking about. With remarkable composure, Patel then pivoted back to a detailed explanation of the classification systems and interagency protocols that had been the original focus of his testimony. He outlined specific procedures for handling different categories of sensitive information, citing both regulations and practical considerations from his experience. The substantive expertise he displayed, speaking with authority about complex national security matters without notes, served as a powerful counterpoint. 2. Nadler's earlier suggestion that he was somehow unqualified to address American security concerns. Committee members from both parties engaged with this substantive testimony, asking detailed questions that Patel answered with precision and depth. The hearing, which had nearly derailed into partisan chaos, had been transformed by Patel's dignified response into a productive discussion of important national security issues. As the hearing continued, the dynamic had fundamentally changed. Committee members who had been prepared for partisan combat now directed substantive, respectful questions to Patel. His responses remained focused on providing expertise rather than scoring political points, further elevating the tone of the proceedings. Congressman Jim Jordan, the ranking Republican member, eventually addressed the elephant in the room. "Mr. Patel, I want to commend you not just for your expertise, but for the extraordinary dignity with which you responded to what I consider a deeply inappropriate comment. Your composure speaks volumes about your character." Several other Republican members echoed this sentiment, with some calling for formal actions against Nadler, but Patel consistently steered the conversation back to substantive matters, refusing to fan the flames of controversy. More remarkably, several Democratic members also found ways to acknowledge Patel's handling of the situation. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, a respected senior Democrat on the committee, posed a question about classification reviews, but prefaced it by saying, "Mr. Patel, I appreciate the professionalism you've displayed today under difficult circumstances. It reminds us that national security should transcend partisan divisions." This bipartisan acknowledgement of Patel's dignity in the face of offense represented a rare moment of unity in an otherwise divided committee. As the hearing neared its conclusion, Chairman Nadler again addressed the earlier incident. "Before we adjourn, I want to reiterate my apology to Mr. Patel," he said, his tone more sincere than his earlier brief acknowledgement. "My comment was inappropriate and does not reflect the values of this committee or Congress as an institution. Mr. Patel's service to this country deserves respect regardless of any policy disagreements we may have." This more wholesome apology, unusual from a chairman to a witness, reflected how completely Patel's response had changed the tenor of the proceedings. Patel nodded acknowledgement. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I hope we can all focus on the substantive national security challenges that face our nation." As the hearing concluded, something remarkable happened. Members from both parties approached Patel not just to shake his hand, but to engage in substantive conversations about the security issues he had raised. The racial insult that might have dominated headlines had been transformed by Patel's response into a moment of unexpected civility and substance. Reporters who had been poised to write stories about partisan conflict found themselves instead documenting a rare example of grace under pressure in the political arena. As Patel left the committee room, surrounded by members from both parties who wanted to continue their discussions, the contrast between the hearing's low point and its conclusion could not have been more stark. What had begun with one of the most inappropriate comments in recent congressional history had ended with the display of dignity that transcended partisan divisions. A transformation entirely due to Kash Patel's decision to respond to offense with patriotism and substance rather than anger and recrimination. The ashen aftermath of the confrontation between Congressman Nadler and Kash Patel extended far beyond the hearing room. Within hours, video clips of both the offensive comment and Patel's measured response had spread across social media platforms and news sites, generating millions of views and extensive commentary from across the political spectrum. Major news. Networks covered the exchange prominently with headlines like "Dignity in the Face of Insult." Patel's response to Nadler's racial comment draws bipartisan praise, and how Kash Patel turned a racist moment into a lesson on American identity. Political. Commentators from both sides found rare common ground in their assessment of the exchange. Conservative host Ben Shapiro tweeted, "Whatever your politics, Patel's response to being told to go back was a masterclass in dignity and patriotism. This is how you win the argument and the moral high ground." Liberal MSNBC host Rachel Maddow opened her show with, "Today we saw something remarkable. A moment when someone chose to respond to ugliness with such composure and substantive focus that they actually changed the entire conversation." Kash Patel's response should be studied by anyone interested in effective communication. The incident prompted broader discussions about immigrants in public service and the nature of American identity. Op-eds appeared with titles like "The Americans Who Came From Somewhere Else" and "Patriotism Beyond Birthplace." What Patel's response teaches us about American identity. For Kash. Patel personally, the hearing marked a significant elevation of his public profile. Interview requests poured in from media outlets across the spectrum, with many specifically interested in his personal story as the child of immigrants who had risen to top national security positions. In his first post-hearing interview with CBS News, Patel maintained the same measured tone that had characterized his response in the committee room. "My focus remains on the substantive national security issues I was called to testify about," he said. "Those issues affect all Americans regardless of background, and they deserve serious attention." When pressed specifically about Nadler's comment, Patel again refused to inflame tensions. Chairman Nadler apologized, and I accepted that apology. "I believe we all have moments we regret, especially in high-pressure situations. What matters now is focusing on the important work of keeping Americans safe." This gracious approach further enhanced Patel's reputation as someone who prioritized national interests over personal or partisan advantage. The incident also prompted reflection from Congressman Nadler, who found himself facing criticism from constituents and colleagues alike. A week after the hearing, Nadler issued a more comprehensive statement. "My comment to Mr. Patel was inexcusable and contradicts the values I fought for throughout my career. I've reached out to him privately to express my sincere regret, and I commit to ensuring that such language is never again used in congressional proceedings." This fuller accountability, rare in the current political climate, was widely attributed to the dignity of Patel's original response, which had made it impossible to dismiss the comment as mere partisan bickering. Perhaps most significantly, the exchange became a touchpoint in broader national conversations about immigration, service, and American identity. Schools began incorporating video of Patel's response into civics lessons about citizenship and public discourse. Diversity trainers in government and corporate settings used it to illustrate how to address inappropriate comments while maintaining professional focus. A month after the hearing, Patel was invited to deliver a lecture at the Kennedy School of Government on National Security Service in a Diverse America. The event drew an overflow crowd and featured attendees from across the political spectrum. In that lecture, Patel expanded on themes he had touched on during the hearing. America's greatest strength has always been its ability to incorporate the talents and perspectives of people from diverse backgrounds. He said, "In the national security community, I've seen firsthand how that diversity of experience creates more robust analysis and better decision-making." He continued, "The notion that American identity is tied to ethnicity or birthplace isn't just morally wrong. It's strategically misguided. Our competitors on the global stage lack America's ability to attract and integrate talent from around the world. That diversity is a competitive advantage we should be celebrating, not questioning. This framing, presenting diversity not just as a moral value, but as a strategic asset, resonated across political lines, earning praise from both conservative national security experts and progressive commentators." 6 months after the hearing, a bipartisan congressional delegation invited Patel to join them on a trip to Asia, specifically seeking his expertise on security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. Images of Patel standing alongside both Democratic and Republican representatives as they met with foreign leaders symbolized how his handling of the Nadler incident had elevated him above partisan politics. For ordinary Americans, particularly immigrants and their children, Patel's response became a powerful example of maintaining dignity in the face of prejudice. Community organizations serving immigrant populations reported using the video as a teaching tool, showing how Patel had asserted his American identity without apologizing for his heritage. What made Patel's response so powerful? Wrote psychology professor Dr. Jennifer Richardson in The Atlantic, was his refusal to accept the false choice between his immigrant background and his American identity. Instead, he demonstrated how his family's immigrant experience had deepened his commitment to American values, a narrative that resonates with millions of American families. 1 year after the hearing, a study of congressional discourse noted a measurable decrease in xenophobic or racially charged language in committee proceedings, with several staffers specifically citing the Nadler-Patel incident as a turning point. That exchange showed how quickly such comments can backfire when met with dignity rather than reciprocal anger. One senior committee staff member reported, "For Kash Patel himself, the incident ultimately opened doors rather than creating limitations." His reputation as someone who could maintain focus on substance even in highly charged situations made him increasingly sought after as an advisor and commentator on national security matters. When interviewed about the long-term impact of the exchange for a PBS documentary on civil discourse, Patel reflected, "In our increasingly divided political climate, it's easy to respond to offense with more offense, but that rarely changes. Mines or advances important discussions. Sometimes choosing dignity over anger can create unexpected opportunities for genuine communication, even across deep divides." This perspective, focusing on effectiveness rather than righteous indignation, offered a rare alternative to the outrage-driven approach that dominated much of contemporary political discourse. The legacy of the Nadler-Patel exchange ultimately transcended both men, becoming a reference point for how inflammatory moments could be transformed through personal dignity and substantive focus. In congressional orientation sessions, new members were shown the clip as an example of both what to avoid, Nadler's comment, and how to respond effectively to offense, Patel's measured response. As one congressional historian noted, "In an era characterized by increasing polarization and declining civility, the Nadler-Patel incident stands out not because of the offensive comment, which unfortunately has parallels throughout congressional history, But because of how Patel's response transformed what could have been just another partisan flashpoint into a moment of genuine reflection about American identity and values. That transformation from racial insult to substantive dialogue offered a template for how individual choices in moments of tension could either escalate division or create unexpected paths toward mutual respect and understanding. If you found this analysis of this remarkable exchange valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of pivotal moments in American political life. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on how we can elevate our national discourse in these divided times.